Hi guys, and welcome to this new lecture. In this lecture, we want to talk about solid layers, what we can do with them, what are they for, how we can use solid layers to create certain, shapes, custom shapes. So to create your solid layer, you come to layer and say new and say solid. The name of the solid layer is usually the default color that you have chosen or the color you have chosen. You see, if I change color, the name is changing. So let's go for dark blue, for example. The width and height, that is the size of your solid layer, and it's determined from here. This is the initial size, you would say. It's usually the size of your composition. Of course, you can come and change it, give it any size. If you don't have anything definite in mind, just make it composition size. And let's click OK. Notice what happened. First of all, in the project panel, you have a folder called solids. So After Effects will group all your solids, all the solids that you have created just here. So as long as you have one solid, you can replicate this solid and put it as a layer in all the compositions that you have created. And you can use it, first of all, as a background. You can just lock it, and this is the background color of your composition. It's a background color better than the background color of the composition itself, because you might want to render the composition as no background, and then the background that you given here will not appear in the rendering. We'll see that later in the course, but yet a solid layer will give you a better background with same kind of colors, in fact. So now in the solid layer, what do we have? We have the transform, and that's all. You can use the 5 transformations. So you can come and adjust your layer, give it the size that you want. And it can be used as a background for a section of the screen, for example, or just like a shape that you can move around and do whatever you want with it. Fine. So now let's create another one. Let's create another solid layer. We come to new and we go solid. And this time let's change colors. Let's give it a yellow, something like this. You notice how the name is changing. So now we have solid yellow or yellow solid. And we click OK. Now we have 2 of them. Let's resize this one. And now we have 2 solid layers, just to show you. Now notice you created another one in the solids folder, and it is put as a layer here. Of course, you can come and put another one here and resize it. So actually, it works as a layer, but still is a single solid. When you drop that solid, it will cover the whole screen. This is the initial size that you have given it. Let's delete this one. So though I'm resizing every layer, I have a single solid here for all the layers. Cool. Let's say you want to change the color of the solid layer. You select your layer, you go to layer and say solid settings. And in the solid settings, you can change the color to anything you want. That's perfect. You notice how the colors are changing here. Cool. You notice what's happening here. Now, there is here affect all layers that use this solid. So here I have 2 layers. If I click on this one, I choose it and change the color to abrupt yellow, you notice that the colors of the layers have changed. If I untick this one, I will be changing the color of a single layer. You notice how it's changing here. Now also it's creating a new layer. Let's click OK for that, and notice here we have a new, not OK to change the colors. If you click, it's an OK. If you remove, it's a new. In the folder, you have a new solid layer, but in the composition, you just changed the color, and of course, it changed its name. So this is about how to, adjust your layers, change the colors, and also understand that solids are all here. Now, what is good about it, that these solids can work across all compositions. Let's create a new composition with the same background. Now we have comp2. If I take, let's drop it up. Let's take deep blue, for example, and put it here. I have deep blue over here. If I change the color of deep blue, solid setting, and I say affect all colors, so that's an OK, and go to a white, for example, you notice it has changed in this composition, but also it has changed in this composition. Of course, this is the original size. So this is very good, because if you have it as a background, for example, if I reset it, this is the background, it will become the background for all your compositions. This is very handy when you start doing pre-compositions. We will learn that in the next section, in fact. So this is about the solid layers and how to adjust them. Let's delete this whole. Let's close this composition, delete it from here. I don't like congestions. And let's take only the yellow one and come back and we say reset in the transform. So it goes back to the original size that you have used to create it. Now, what I can do with a solid layer, the first thing you do with a solid layer is a background, as we said. The second one, there are so many effects and presets that you can use on top of the solid layer. For example, just to show you, you don't need to know that. If I go to generate, it's just to give you a glimpse of what you do with solid layers. If I go to fractal, for example, and I drop it here, of course, we'll see all about presets. Now, if you want a fractal background, you can only put a solid layer and apply the effect on the solid layer. You can come and change the effects the way you want now here. Cool. Let's delete this effect. Go back to normal. Now, another use for solid layers, which is somehow the most important. You can use masks to create certain shapes with solid layers. First of all, you have the parametric shapes, that is rectangle. You created now a mask. Now, please, in After Effects, there is shape layers, and there is a solid layer with a mask. So if you create a solid layer and put a mask, please, it looks like a shape, but it doesn't behave like a shape. It behaves like a mask. And so now you have a mask with a background color. In fact, it is very far from shape. So please don't call it, I created a shape. You didn't create a shape. You created a solid layer and you created a mask on the solid layer. Now, masks, as we have seen, have their own properties, like the mask path. Here you can come and, adjust the size of the mask. Now I'm not playing with the solid layer, I'm using the mask. Come, click, and start playing with the corners to get your shape the way you want it, for example. Cool. Let's delete this mask and we go back to the original. Of course, you can use the other parametric tools, such as the ellipse, to create a circle or an ellipse. Here you are. Now, the most important here is when we want to use the pen tool. This is when the solid layers with the pen tool, you can create very customizable shapes. So I will choose my solid layer, come to the pen tool and start creating or clicking to create the mask. And of course, now I created a certain shape. That's very practical because I can make it the way I want. This is my boat, for example. Nice boat. And you can, of course, animate it through the mask. If you put mask path here, you keyframe it, and then you come after 1 second, for example. You change the position of the nodes. Here you are. You now have an animation with the mask. That's cool. Like this. Cool. If you run your animation, spacebar, for example, you have this shape changing or morphing to another shape. So this is how you use the solid layers. My greatest interest in this course, I will not be using solid layers unless I'm using them as a background. For example, if I were to do a background here for a lower third, a series of lower thirds, what I will do is to come to layer, say new solid layer, just give it any size here, change the color to something we can see. Then I will come and, for example, this becomes the background. I will lock it, the background for text that is going to appear or something like this, or maybe other shapes that are going to appear here. Now, this is very useful and it's quite good. You don't have to put a shape layer here, so you will use that solid layer. So the concept of solid layer is not about creating, shapes. No, use the shapes themselves. It is about creating backgrounds or certain sophisticated shapes that you want to create custom shapes. Now, the benefit of using a solid layer here will be to be able to use the mask, for example. Let's put a mask here. And then I can use the feathering of the mask. Of course, I can hide the feathering. I can use the opacity. Okay, and I have the mask expansion like you have seen before. Cool. So this is the way to do it. And this is the way you use solid layers. I mean, I would use a solid layer here to make this kind of shape or this kind of background if I want to. Cool. Thank you very much for listening. It has been a long lecture and I hope you have benefited. Now, for the time being, I will use most of the time shapes and not masks to be able to create the shapes. And I will use solid layers with or without masks to create the backgrounds. But of course, think about it. Shape layers is for creating shapes. And solid layers is for creating solids that will act at the background or to apply effects. Masks can mask the shapes, the text, and the solid layers. That's all that I have to tell you about the solid layers, and I hope it was fun. And I will see you in the next lecture.